My name is Joe Kugler. This is Andrew Ross. We are here from Veritas. We're here to talk about the online support journey that we have just gone through at Veritas. I'm a customer experience manager and kind of led the project on the design of the support site. Andrew's the brains in the operation. He's the guy who makes it work, and it's all really based heavily on Fusion. So it's a story that we like to tell. Little background on Veritas. Veritas has been around for a long time, since 1983. Some of the products that you may have heard of are things like InfoScale, NetBackup, and so on. We're really into data protection, data availability, application availability, and using analytics on the data to learn more about customer usage and internal usage and so on. Some key dates. The company was founded in 1983. We spent some time with Symantec. We were acquired by Symantec in 2004 and then reseparated in 2016, largely because of kind of different business models and different customer bases. But one of the key pieces of that, Symantec is much more focused on B2C and selling to individual users, where Veritas really works more at the enterprise level. So a lot of the technology that we had as we did the separation really wasn't appropriate for what we needed to do for enterprise customers. So we had an opportunity to kind of start from scratch, which is interesting because we can take advantage of everything that has been learned from previous attempts at it. So our business goal, we had a project we called Web First, and really the idea is to get our users to use the web as their first resource, right? So when they need support, when they need additional help, we want them to go there and only escalate to a case if absolutely necessary. So we kind of defined a strategy. We wanted the phrasing on this was kind of intentional. Allow customers to succeed. So customers throughout all the research that we did and what's industry research, customers really want to self-serve. They don't want to have to open up cases. It's like the last thing they want to do. So we wanted to create an environment where customers could succeed in finding what they need. So across all of the different data that we provide in terms of technical notes, documentation, software downloads, that all needed to be made easier. We really needed to reduce customer effort in this interaction, so make it super simple, make it easy to find what they need, and make it easier to collaborate with support engineers when they actually open a case. TSC effort, so support engineers trying to reduce the amount of effort that is being spent on each case, trying to shorten that time to resolution, trying to get to first call resolution. This is a key component in that. And the last one we kind of put in as sort of a stretch challenge for us, but we really, we thought we knew what we needed to do, but we wanted to test ourselves in the industry. And so we really put a goal to try to win industry awards for the work that we were doing. So as we started the project, we've got the three-legged stool there. Our three legs, we were really focused on usability and technology and content. Those three pieces really needed to come together to make this work. So user research, we spent a lot of time working with users up front. It's really important to kind of connect with people and understand what their expectations were. Support websites are, kind of a well-defined entity, but we really wanted to connect with customers, find out what they liked from what we had, as well as, kind of what they needed from the site. And so we identified from that research kind of three top tasks. So searching, I've got a problem, I need to find an answer. Browsing, I've got, maybe I've got a product and I'm looking at adjacent technology, or I'm looking at, a new version, new upgrade, that kind of thing. So I just want to kind of browse around and find what's there. And then the last one, of course, was, when I can't find my answer, I need to open a case, and I want to do it simply through the web. Part of what we had to do is research on what we had. So this goes back to the website I was talking about that we started with as we separated from Symantec. The challenges we had there, we had a lot of sites. So for a company that had been around for 20 plus years and had gone through mergers and separations, there were a lot of different silos that had developed. And I'll show you a picture of that on the next slide. Product taxonomy was all over the map. We referred to our products different on every site that we had. We had different numbers of products, different ways of classifying. So it was really chaotic for users as they were, trying to interact with the site. We really wanted to support mobile. Looking at the analytics we had, it wasn't a huge piece of our current user base, but as you look forward and look at what's going on, mobile has to be supported, and so we wanted to do that right from the start. The other thing we were asking a lot about was content, and for the most part, the comments about content was there were just too many pieces of content that just pointed to other content. And I think what happened is over the years, the difficulty of trying to navigate through the website, a lot of people just kind of went commando and said, I'm going to create this article, and here's all the links of everything that might be related to it. And so we kind of had this mentality of these magic articles that everybody knew the URL and everybody knew the ID, and they wanted to have redirects put in place as we went from version to version and things like that. So it was a very, very chaotic setup. This is a graphic we used a lot as we worked with executives to try to sell this vision. We had 8 different websites here basically. We had the corporate site, we had one site for creating cases, we had another site for managing cases, we had a different site for support, for searching the knowledge base, we had a community site, there was a different site for licensing, appliances, and so on. So this picture of this guy scratching his head, that was basically what we were doing to our customers. In addition to that, whoops, I didn't realize this was a build. We had this product taxonomy thing that I mentioned. So across all of those different sites, we had different ways of referring to the products. When it came time to create cases, we presented users with a flat list of 140 product names and said, pick your product and create your case. And then as you went to search for content that was related to it, it was an entirely different set of product names. So we really wanted to establish this mentality where if I'm looking at creating cases on product X, I should be able to find content on X and documentation and tie that all together. So taxonomy was really a critical piece. On top of that, in the boxes, we kind of grouped our products differently. And even on our corporate site, on the same site, we had 2 completely different groupings of products. And so, trying to navigate through this if you're a customer is, darn near impossible. So, as we start on the 3 legs of the stool, usability, we had some very specific goals that we were trying to achieve. And I'll show you some pictures of kind of where we ended up here. But a big piece was trying to minimize the cognitive load on the users. There's a great book out there called Don't Make Me Think, and it's about web design and talks about just sort of principles that you can apply to the pages of your site that have become kind of design patterns that everybody knows that you just kind of intuitively get. So we really wanted to get to the point where people could kind of move around the page and go where they needed to go without even having to think about it, not try to interpret what they were seeing. Search, obviously, with the feedback we had from customers, everything is centered around search. And that's how we ended up working with Fusion. One of the key pieces was unified search. So we have a number of different databases that contain content of interest. We really wanted to stay away from search here, search here, search here. We wanted to have one search and then provide the faceting and the filtering to help people narrow in on their content. Taxonomy, we talked about that. That was probably the most difficult piece of the whole project. Taxonomy touches everybody, and as soon as you start changing the way that you refer to product names, everybody in the company gets real concerned about that. So that took a whole lot of arm twisting and meetings and discussion to get there, but that's really paid off for us in the long run. Responsive design, we talked about the importance of mobile, so we did kind of responsive from the start. Streamlined case management, we did want to make it easy for users to interact with us on cases, but there's sort of a business balance on this. You don't want to make it too easy to find where it is to create the cases. So the design that we did is very intentional. All of the self-help pieces are at the top, and you kind of have to scroll down the page to get to the point where you can create a case. So trying to get people to try to, to help themselves first before they call for help. Product-specific support pages, I call this out. One of the things that's interesting as you talk with customers, There's a half dozen different ways that people think about getting to information. So some like to browse, some like to search, some like to have a product support home for that particular thing. So we really want one set of content, but the ability to present it in a variety of different user patterns. So that was interesting as we tried to design this and bring this all together. The last one, we put together at a previous company, I had a problem where our own support engineers would get asked for help by customers. How do I use your site? And they would go, I don't know, I never use it. So when we got to this project, we decided we were going to build basically two sites that were nearly identical. So our internal site that the support engineers used looks almost exactly the same as the external site. There's, of course, a different set of repositories because internal content, obviously. But in the end, the homepage looks the same, the results page look the same, and it makes it really easy for the TSEs to explain to customers how to use that. Eventually, we hope to merge the two into one once we get the right level of identity and security in place. Then we can have one site that will look different depending on who the person is that's logging in. Feel free to add where you need to, too. All right, so where we're heading right now, I mean, we're getting near to achieving this vision, but the idea was we want to take that picture that we showed earlier, the 8 different websites, and kind of collapse that down into really just these 3. So we have a corporate site that is, the marketing site, the traditional .com site. We have a community, so we call our community Vox, but that's a lithium-based community. And then we have the support site, which I'll show you in just a moment. And then we have a site called PartnerNet. So PartnerNet is where the partners go to set up their participation in partner programs. None of the content really goes there. It's all kind of through the other sites. The other thing we did is API first design, we call it. So everything we did, we tried to design with APIs so that they could be reusable. So we wanted to make it so that the search engine, it's called by our site, but it could also be called in product and so on, and reused in a number of different places. And then, of course, the last piece, corporate identity management. We still don't quite have that in place yet, but that will be key to kind of making this all work in the end. So the home pages, these are the 2 home pages. So the big one is the customer-facing site, and the smaller one is the internal site. So you can see they're basically the same. If we call out, the things that we saw from the survey, so search is at the top, the big search box. That search box is also on every page on the site. So no matter what you're doing, search is right there. It's always available. One of the things that, one of the decisions we made is to leave the content available to Google for crawling. So people can, that's where people go first. They start there. But what that really means is when they find content there and they click on it, they come to our site, they may never see the home page. So every page really has to be like a home page. So that the key pieces that we wanted to have there in terms of searching and browsing and things, those had to appear. So the top part is the search. The next row, that's kind of the top tasks. That's how you browse to content. So we've got knowledge base and documentation, and then we have a couple of other top tasks. We have an appliances management page and a software downloads page and so on. So this is the search results page. This is where we start to see some of the really cool stuff that Fusion does for us. So search box at the top, that like I said, that is on every page. Faceting down the left, one of the things that we wanted to do was have the unified search, like I talked about. So that leftmost tab, that's everything. That's all the results brought together. They're all indexed together, and so there's none of the federated kind of search behavior that users have to go through. But if they want to get just to a single repository, they can click on the tabs. It's really like a facet filter, except I think it's more intuitive, from a user perspective. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback on that, so we're real pleased with the way that's working. Another feature that Fusion gives us is the featured result, so the darker blue there. We can define specific keywords so that if a user does one of those searches, we can pop that up intentionally, and we can put URLs in there, links to other sites, links to specific content, and so on. So it's a first cut at trying to do some level of personalization. One of the other things I think that we did that is working out well is, if you can see the smiley face under that kind of first result, we're tracking user feedbacks on all of the content. So when they see search results, they can see how many other people liked the result and thought it was positive. See what I'm talking about? Oop. Okay. All right, good. Yeah, I hear you. Yes?
Is this a completely custom front-end built, or is this built with Usability?
No, this is custom. We did this with Adobe Experience Manager. Yeah. The other thing I think, this is, the highlighting that you're seeing, that comes from Fusion. The contextual summaries, they come from Fusion. We have a lot of control over how we display that and what part of it we display and so on. So technology, as I mentioned, Adobe Experience Manager is the platform that it's built on. We've got Fusion, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. During the course of this project, our corporation decided to swap out CRM systems. So that was interesting. We had Salesforce and swapped out to Oracle Service Cloud during the process. And then we use a lot of the Adobe products for reporting and tracking what's going on. API first design, I mentioned that. That was we have a very sharp developer on the team who is able to kind of put together all of these different data sources and build APIs on top of them. So that allows us to call, like I mentioned, to call these through web services and reuse the data. Another thing we did, Fusion is fast. We did a lot of tuning of that to get the speed right. We also built a caching layer so that all of the content is stored in the cache. So if a user does a search and clicks on a result, it's a very quick process. And search often ends up being kind of a conversation, right? You do a search, you find something, you maybe tune it a little bit, do another search, click on a few documents. That ability to load those just instantly makes a big difference from a user perspective. We also, we have a UX guy on the team who built what we call the Veritas design language. This is actually a reusable UX library. We use it with the tools that we sell, but then we also extended it to the website. So it gives you nice continuity of look and feel, but it's also a library of parts. So drop downs and things like that. And these libraries can be updated and pushed back out to the tools and updated in a matter of a week or so, right? So it's a pretty quick process, and it keeps us consistent as a company. Yeah. I've got two more slides I'll show you. That kind of comes from that as well. We have a database we call Rosetta. And so all the product information is stored in there, all the end-of-life data and all that kind of stuff. And we use that really across the whole site. We wanted to have the same set of product names appearing everywhere. So that's the source. That causes a lot of arm wrestling from time to time, but it's worked well, yeah. Yeah?
With the caption layer and everything, are you sending that click information to Fusion for signals?
Yes. Do you want to talk about that at all?
So for signals, on our internal site, we really have implemented that to boost the more relevant content. On our external site, we wanted to get the data to maintain the relevance. On the external site, we spent a lot more time fine-tuning, and then we kind of transferred that fine-tuning onto the internal version of it. So we're still collecting that content and trying to make it cohesive across so we can get accurate signals and really boost it in a useful way.
We know we want to use that. We know we want to add to that in the future. Right now, I think the focus has been getting on a foundation in place. But we're capturing the data, we're doing the aggregation and stuff, but I think that's part of the reason we're here too, is to try to hear more about what's going on with that and try to figure out what are the right signals to feed back in and how can we drive that. There's a lot of enthusiasm for it.
at all? Like, do you try to rank the relevancy based on the persona, or is it more of a across the board, just boosting things that are popular without kind of knowing who somebody is?
No, yeah, we don't have any personalization as of right now.
But that's on the roadmap too. I think we need to get the identity management in place so we can understand roles, and especially with our kind of software, there's administrators who do the installation, and there's purchasing guys, and then there's guys who actually run the software. So trying to be able to understand that and tune the kind of content we bring to them. We're putting a lot of work into content, trying to separate that out into the right logical repositories so we can display that appropriately to the right users. So again, that's another reason we're here.
It's also another reason why we're still waiting to implement signals in a very cohesive way. So.
You need to know who they are.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, that would help a lot. All right, so Fusion itself, because we're at the conference here, we really tried to use everything we could from Fusion that made sense, and I'm sure I probably missed some things, but I think Fusion provides all of these. Where we had a little bit of interesting time is trying to bring those all together and get them all to work simultaneously. So things like stemming and synonyms and stuff. That's like has been said so many times at the conference so far. Just make it work like Google. Well, Google does all these kinds of things, so the expectation is that it should be there as well. So trying to get those in place, the highlighting in the contextual summaries, exact match searches, that's real important. And especially, I think one of the things I've learned is that customers tend to search differently than employees. Employees know kind of what they're trying to find. They know the name of it, or they have an exact error message they're trying to hit. So getting that exact match search to work properly, especially when you throw in things like stop words and stuff, the complexity of the interaction of all those got to be very high. Special character handling in a technical search, that's important to deal with that properly. We are, like I mentioned, we're gathering some of the signal data, featured results, I showed that as well, spelling. So these are all things, we kind of had them all working. Where we really got a lot of help from Lucidworks was trying to get those to work together. We did a professional services engagement and got some help there. We had a couple of super sharp guys that were able to spend some late nights with us and help us get that working. But that's where Andrew learned a lot, right?
That was my boot camp.
Baptism by fire, I think. So the logical view, this, I won't spend tons of time on this, but kind of the bottom right is kind of the documentation. The bottom left is the CRM, and so cases and articles are stored there. And then, they're the kinds of things that need to get searched. And of course, right at the heart is Fusion. There's the two sites that go with it. And then there's that services layer that I mentioned. That's where the caching happens. That's where a lot of the translation from one system to another happens. That's our magic layer. And then the other thing we did, especially for the internal employees, is trying to start to index other repositories. So we use Jira, Confluence, JAMA. VDocs is an internal SharePoint site. But so we have this content that we had to create the display for. But these other repositories, they're all things that we plan to add into the internal search engine. So really it becomes kind of an enterprise search, for technical content and so on. We've got a couple of connectors in place so far, and more to come on that. The other thing that we just released was the download center. So another site kind of goes by the wayside that used to happen in a totally different system, and now we've brought that into the support experience. So to get software downloads, there's the downloads button on the main page, and it's a very download-centric system. The one big thing that we still need to add is the notification system. There's a lot of demand for, I'd like to subscribe to an article or subscribe to a product and get push notifications when new content becomes available. So that's kind of the next big focus for us. Content. So some of the key decisions on this one, when we started, all of our content was in one great big giant database. Everything had been dumped there. Documentation was there. There were big full PDFs of the document, as well as individual sections of documentation, because the the team had tried to make documentation searchable in a way that was user friendly when you're dealing with PDFs. So we had 160,000 documents in one database, basically. So we've done a lot of work to try to separate those. In particular, on the documentation, that's real interesting. HTML presentation of documentation is much more readable. But we need to find a way to make it so it's searchable as well. So what we actually did, we took the content and broke that down into individual sections of content, and then added enough metadata to it so that when we display that, this is the documentation, you can actually reconstruct the table of contents on the left. So each page like this is its own HTML, its own URL, but from that we can present the table of contents and allow for book-like reading, next page, previous page, and so on.
So the table of contents is faster?
It's not search. That is actually built from the doc repo. We contacted directly to get the content. The content from search is more for finding it and then linking to it as well. So we have a cohesive system of finding exact sections. So if you search for an exact section and you click that section, it'll take you to the book, but it'll open that section and display it for you.
So are you indexing the sections separately from the entire document?
We only index the sections.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is no entire document. When you're looking at a book, we do have PDFs that are paired to it. So there's a icon here where you can click and then you can download the PDFs if you want to have it on your own device and stuff. Yeah. The other thing that gets a little tricky, and I think we're still wrestling with this, is how do we display titles on this? So you can see, at the top, these are the book names, and then this is a section name. And this is one of those things where there's different ways of searching. Some people are looking for books. Some people are looking for content, right? And so we're wrestling with how do we display, allow users to search by book name versus, the content within the book kind of thing. So always something to work on.
What kind of search did you use before you used Fusion?
Google search.
Well, we had GSA for the internal search, and then on the customer-facing side, it was actually Salesforce search. Yeah. The other thing, the knowledge base, that's kind of a key piece for us. Again, that's been around for a long time. We've got some content in there that was originally published in like 2004. So we're working real hard to try to get the organization to adopt principles of KCS. So that's knowledge-centered service. It's a methodology that's developed by the Consortium for CSI. I can't remember the S right now, but so anyway, that's kind of a best-in-class knowledge practice, and we're working with the support organization to try to roll that out. That's really a case where the TSCs, when they get a case, they'll search for content first. If they can find it, they link it to the case, they review it and refine it, make it better. And only if they can't find content do they create new content. So the idea is that the content is always being maintained, it's always up to date, and then by tracking usage, we can retire content that is no longer being used and keep the knowledge base clean and concise and up to date. So the other piece that was kind of key for us is connecting to the community site. So there's again different users and where they tend to go first. It can be different, but we really want to try to get these guys to work together. So within the support site, we do index all of the community content, and we present those results back if a user does a search. And then on the flip side, back on the community site, we plan to use Fusion again to try to, if there's a forum conversation going on that remains unanswered, to try to pull some content from the support site over and post some articles alongside to try to help solve that as well. So the more we can get those communities to interact, the better. So ROI, this is always a tough one for sites like this. I think the executives tend to talk about case deflection. How can we make cases go away? And those are really direct costs, and it's an easy way to calculate. The difficulty is if a case doesn't happen, you're trying to measure something that hasn't happened. So we really tried to come up with something that was a little bit more tangible, that was a little bit more understandable. So our premise was, if we design the site correctly, and if we have good technology that works quickly, and we have good content, it should make it easier for users to solve their own cases. And so we kind of made this definition of easy cases. So we said, any case that's open and closed within 8 hours, so 1 business day basically, we're going to use that as kind of our test group. And if our site is working the way it's supposed to, the percentage of overall cases that are being created that are these easy cases should start to diminish, because people are solving them themselves, and what's ending up in the call center are really the tougher cases that haven't been solved previously. And so, looking at that, we could kind of put together a overtime kind of scenario, and if we could deflect, whatever percentage, and pretty quickly over the case of, or over the space of 3 years, it comes out to, better than $5 million. So it's a simple calculation. I think, a lot of times when you talk to executives and you try to define, here's how we're going to measure this, and it's really an unmeasurable thing. Their eyes roll back and you've kind of lost them. So this is something that's really simple and really tangible, and it's kind of easy for those guys to understand what we're proposing. There's other things that we wanted to capture as well. Case creation by source. So we're really trying to push people to go online instead of having to have people staffing the phones to take calls that way. We're trying to move the percentage of users who create cases online. So we've gone from 30% of cases to almost 60 now that are being created online. And again, that's just all direct cost savings. The other piece is case routing. As cases come in, trying to have the system do the automation so they get routed directly to the right TSC who can help them and not have to go to a customer care organization. So we've gotten to the point where about 90% of the cases go right to where they're supposed to go. There's also a couple of indirect measurements. Customer sat, a lot of people talk about that. But customer effort score is one that's kind of getting a lot of focus right now. They talk about, this comes from the Customer Executive Board, but basically, if you look at loyalty and predictors of loyalty, if you can measure the customer effort, how hard it is for the customer to work with you and try to drive that down, that's one of the best predictors of loyalty. So we're just adding that to our case transaction survey, and it's one question. It's, how much do you agree with this statement? Veritas made it easy for me to work to solve my problem. So it's something we're going to start tracking and start trying to drive down.
Have you measured the savings from the online case creation and the reduced time to close?
Yes. Yeah, we're tracking that as well. The time to close is a little bit more difficult because it relies a lot on the content. So we've got practices are improving. But what we're seeing, though, is as soon as we can get people to start participating in that the right way, we're seeing 30 to 40% reduction in time to resolution. And so there are, those are nice to have because that makes it easy to come back and go, hey, we got to keep going, right?
You mentioned about $5 million for $7.
So that was, if you just do the calculations on the easy cases, and once you have your baseline, just say, okay, I think we said we could reduce those by like 3% a quarter. So over the course of 1 year, it would be 12% or whatever, and just however many cases you have, and that's an easy thing to track, right? So you can have a real tangible number. For us, when we ran the numbers, it was $5 million over 3 years. So, yeah. All right, cool. Last slide. So lessons learned, I think we look at ourselves critically and try to understand what's working well and what's working not. One of the really benefits that I saw here, and I saw this at my last company too, we're in a situation where the tools and the KM and the experience and all, it's all in the same organization. It's owned by the same group, by the same leader. That's really key. These things all kind of have to work together, and the more that they get developed in silos, the more difficult it becomes to make them mesh. So, the content has to understand the search and the UI, and same thing in the other direction. So by combining these together and having one leader that's focused on all of these, that's really a plus. the second one, I think just having, a customer experience and UX people on the team, that by itself is a huge benefit. I've done things in the past using Paint and trying to draw pictures that way. And we actually had some prototyping tools we could use this time, but once we got our UX guy in there, that just made a world of difference. He could actually do, working HTML. It makes it so much easier to communicate among the team and back with IT and so on. So that was great. Taxonomy, I can't overemphasize how important that was. We're still arguing about it, and that's okay. But if we can stick to the rule that it has to look the same to the customers all across that experience, that really helps simplify, navigation and what they've got in their mind. So that was really a key piece. We're still working hard to try to get, balanced metrics. We really have to kind of look across all of the systems and from a number of different viewpoints to make sure that we're achieving all of the things that we need to achieve. So we're investing a lot in that right now. I mentioned the industry awards thing. I think that's a good thing. We just won ASP, the Association of Support Professionals. They do a competition every year for top support sites, and we were one of the winners this year. It's nice to get that, but I think it's really valuable because it comes with a lot of feedback. There are a series of judges that evaluate the site and kind of tell us what we're doing well and where we need to go next. That was super good, and I think it's just good to have validation from industry experts about what we're doing. And then the last thing, I think, we got to stay on everybody in the organization. Organizations can kind of run on their own cycle, and when you get to a support website like this, that's where it all kind of comes together, and it has to look right to the customers. So we have to constantly work with teams to, help them understand why, no, we can't have an exception this one time, and on and on. So, all right, that's my story.
Any questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned the taxonomy in your own database.
I'm sorry.
I'm trying to figure out what you meant in your taxonomy.
Yeah, sorry, I should have focused on that a little bit more. So on this slide, this Rosetta box at the bottom, that's our product master. That's kind of what drives all the systems. So we have about a 4-level product taxonomy when you start taking into account versions and platforms and things like that. The one rule we have is everything at that top level has to be the same. You can't always do it with all the different content types. On the customer-facing site, we really have tried to stick to it. So everything should look the same on that. Internally, we allow some deviation from that.
All English?
No.
We have 9 different versions of the site. We are just getting ready to kick off a project where we're going to do machine translation of all of the content. So English will be the master, and then whenever a piece of content is changed, it'll be automatically translated into all the other languages. The key on that is getting content out there that Google can crawl in the other languages. So, yeah. Yeah.
Two things, again, aside from the fact that you haven't necessarily committed to machine learning recommendations to what you want to, are you satisfied with the personalization? Are you satisfied with your type ahead strategy? Have you seen that change from one implementation of a product to the next, or is it on
The auto-suggest, yeah. I think we have a little bit of work to do. In particular, the documentation thing, that was just pointed out to us as part of this ASP thing. We have the book names that are the titles, and we're offering up, depending on the query, we'll have maybe multiple suggestions from one book, and in auto-suggest, it's 10 straight things of that same book title. So that was kind of our oversight on missing that. I'm not crazy about what we've seen on that so far, but I don't know that that's not really our fault.
Yeah, so we could talk about that.
Yeah.
The other thing is, you mentioned the lithium to fusion integration bidirectional kind of figuring that out.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
What were your thoughts there? How you visualize that integration?
That's probably something where we would end up talking to Lucidworks. Yeah. Yeah, sure. All right. Good. Thank you, everybody.